Hey YouTube, welcome to another Valkyrie Connect video. My name is Hakeo, and in this video we'll be going over Onslaught and the various mechanics that you have to overcome in the tower. I have today with me AUStarwars. He'll be assisting me in giving you tips and tricks on efficient progression through the tower so that you're able to get as high as possible and try to get as many chests as possible within the event's timeline. And so, AU, you can just introduce yourself and tell me why Onslaught is one of your favorite events.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. My name is AUStarwars. I've been playing Valkyrie Connect since about, I want to say around February I found it. I feel like it's really the best gacha style game, or what I like to call like Final Fantasy combat type games that I've played on any app game thus far. I play other app games as well. I really enjoy Valkyrie Connect and all its various things that you can do on a daily basis, which I think is what makes it really a superior game. The reason why I like Onslaught so much is I'm really a fan of when games force you to have a stable of characters, and not just focus on my main 5 units or my main, even to an extent like my main 10, my main 15. Like, it really forces you to be diversified in attacking different styles of PvP, which is what I really enjoy out of games like this, because you can only field a 5-man team at once. And especially in the PvP sense, I mean, you can change your units here and there, but for Tower and Onslaught, it really forces you to have to do this on every single fight that you face, especially as you start to really climb up the tower. And I just think it's a really strategic event. That's what I really enjoy about it.
Actually, what you mentioned is one of the reasons why I like it so much as well. The various gacha games I've played before, they have the top few units that you use, and you generally use it in every single content in the game. And outside of Onslaught, there are the connects that you can use, and it forces you to optimize your team and change it accordingly. And Onslaught is no exception. And as for that, what are the various tips that you have for a player just coming into Onslaught for the first time? Say this is their first month playing, and currently we have the Niku Tower. What are the tips that you can give to them to help them progress, as well as other towers coming in the future?
Yeah. The first thing I can say is that you need to have an idea of what your main team looks like. And it may look a little slightly different for Tower than it does for your main arena team. I mean, I think you definitely need to have a healer on your team. If you have Erd, she's obviously preferred healer in really any aspect of the game, but it's really important to have her in Tower, because her weapons allow you to heal over time. So, and that becomes important. One of the tips I'll mention later about making sure that you are as fully healed and as fully energied up at the end of each battle as possible to enter the next battles with as much of an advantage as you can. So if you have the ability to have Urge, she's obviously preferred. But this is the first tower, the last tower that happened, not the collab tower, was the first time I had Urge. So most of my strategy came from just having Baldur as my healer. So he should be able to get you through most of it if you don't have Urge yet. The other thing you need is, obviously, the rest of it is pretty much just your best tank, your best DPS. One advice I can give is that you definitely want to have a melee DPS as well, because you're going to be facing such a varied amount of teams, and it gets to be really difficult as you get even higher up. You can't always, it becomes like a worse of 10 different evils that you can face, and a lot of the units that you face off against will hit lines at a time. So you don't want your mages to be hit very quickly. So you typically do need a melee DPS as well. The other reason to have a melee DPS is because oftentimes you can use that melee DPS as like an off tank, or as even the primary tank when you get the opposition down low enough and you just need to finish them off. Some tanks like Luca, they're obviously really good for tanking, but occasionally you really can't finish off the opposition without loading your DPS up. So you can literally have a situation where it's like you're 5 guys against, just one of theirs, and you still can't finish it off because you keep using your tank and she's not doing enough damage. So you really definitely need to concentrate on having at least 1 to 2 melee DPS as well. And you can have things like Thor, or I use Saber a lot, but Thor is a an easy unit, and so is Thrud as well. I use both of those at various times. So really knowing what units to start off with is a great starting point, and concentrating on those. And you're getting a lot of double duty out of it, because that's generally going to be your main arena team, or a large part of your 15-man team as well. So that's the first tip I can give.
Oh, sorry. So you're talking about when you create your team, you want to also have a segmentation to avoid the mid role, which is generally the mage role, to be out damaged too quickly. And you also have your melee. Sometimes you switch out the tank for a committed melee to help DPS down the entire team quicker to finish them off.
Correct.
As for the teams that you're fighting, when you're refreshing, what are you generally looking for, and what do you avoid in terms of units?
Yeah, that actually winds up being arguably the most important part of Tower, especially the higher up you go. As you'll notice, after your opposition starts to get some serious buffs, like over 100%, sometimes over 200%, depending on how high up you go in the tower and beyond. Units that you normally would face off against and be like, oh, that's a unit I can take out no problem, become very deadly, surprisingly deadly, because they aren't the best units all the time. They just happen to get a lot better when you're throwing giant percentages on top of them. So you have to keep that in mind when you're facing off against things. So most of what I look for at the higher units is I tend to avoid Luca teams overall. That's one place to start. Her ability to self-heal herself at those higher levels, 200% and above, it can be just very, very difficult to get her down. You can't do the sustained DPS really all that well. You would need to have a team full of, crowd control type abilities, paralyze, petrify, charm, things like that would have to be hitting her, and you can't always guarantee that. So I tend to avoid Luca teams, period. My tank of choice to face off against is usually Heimdall, because I use a Freya heavy team, so he's always susceptible to her charm because he can't wear a purity ring. If I have no choice and I don't feel like refreshing anymore, Niji is okay, but because I have a mage heavy team, Niji can be a problem for that, especially at the higher level. So I typically try to go for Heimdall based teams. The other units that you want to avoid, and some of these can be pretty popular, is Hell can be very difficult at the higher levels, because her shade against your tank can be very, very deadly for your secondary DPS or your off tank. That off tank melee unit is not always the unit you give all your hit point armor to, or your regeneration type armor to. I mean, they might have some, but they won't have as much as your tank. And that shade hitting you, in the first few turns can just be deadly for that melee, and then the rest of your team will just crumble. So I actually avoid Hell, who, because she's a free hero, a lot of people tend to have. So surprising, but you really want to avoid her later in the tower, because she just becomes a real pain to take down, and she can really hurt your tank's ability to survive. Occasionally, you may want to avoid, some of the higher end units. Like I tend to avoid 5-star Odins. I tend to avoid Mia's, things like that. That you just the top end units you don't always want to see, because you can just you can refresh to get against the team that you're looking for. Occasionally, I will avoid Momiji based teams, because at least in my team, Erd is my final unit, and you can't afford to lose her. So I don't like the matchup of their Momiji versus my Erd. It usually goes in Momiji's favor. So I try to avoid her. I used to avoid Manny as well, because I just didn't like the fact that multiples of my back row units were getting hit. But what I actually discovered is it can be actually good for some of your back row units to get hit, because then their skill will proc more often. So again, because I'm using Freya as my heaviest unit in the tower, I want her ability to proc as often as possible. And because I'm usually targeting teams with, 2, 3, 4 melee, Freya just mows them down easily and forces them to fight against each other. So I don't mind facing off against a 2 to 3 melee team if they have Manny, because it actually helps Freya proc every once in a while.
One thing I want to add on that is that not many people realize about when units hit another unit, it increases their skill gauge quicker. It's something that I find some players overlook, and they get the timings wrong. So usually at the beginning of the fight, they'll pop all of their abilities, and then the enemy team just turns around and mows them down, especially when you're going into the higher towers. One of the other units, personally, I tend to avoid, it's also because of my team setup, is Ronco. And I'm at the point where Ronco puts a unit to sleep, the crit is just going to kill my unit.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't have the luxury of having Erd, and currently, as impractical and inefficient as it sounds, I have no healer on my team.
Wow.
I'm healing off of Straw Hats and Winged Helm.
Wow.
And yeah, I find that I only merc out Erd because obviously I don't have her to re-heal my team back up, and generally by that time either my refresh is ready or I'm to the next level and it refreshes my mercs again.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's Go ahead.
One other thing I forgot to mention is at the highest levels, and I think I'm currently sitting at like 380 or something like that for the current tower, and I'm not like a super whale by any stretch of the imagination. You almost have to avoid healers overall. The healing, when you start to get over 200% type buffs, you literally are just doing no damage. It's okay if you take on a Baldur, because the fact that he's not a heal over time, the fact that he just has a burst heal, means that a fight will go longer. You may have to fight the same person literally 4, 5, 6 times, but they're not also taking you down. You have to avoid Erd at all times. You'll just never break through that. And I don't have much experience fighting against Spooky Idun. I just tend to avoid her because she is a healer, but I don't really know how difficult she is and how much she helps out.
If you're comparing her to Baldur and her to Baldur, I personally avoid her over Baldur because I find her more annoying to deal with. The thing with Baldur as well, I will fight a team with him if they tend to have, let's just say, like one melee, and I can actually shade that melee.
Oh, sure.
And charm or just start going to town on the mages. And one thing that you mentioned too is, as long as your DPS can outdo the heal, at some point you'll beat that team. But obviously with Erd, it's way more difficult, especially like at your level, where the 45% is pretty much all the work you just put in that one fight when she heals her your entire team.
Yeah, it's almost insurmountable. I avoid her at all costs, even like 3-star versions and things like that, especially at the higher levels.
So one thing to keep in mind, everyone, is you can refresh the teams that you're facing. It costs mana, but it's pretty negligible. And another thing is, if the fight is not going your way, you can click the top icon in the right hand corner to quit. It'll reset the fight back to square one to where you previously left off, but that way your units can either live and try again and you don't have to refresh, or you get your HP back to where it was before the fight started. And I find that some players don't know that, and it's really valuable in progression, especially tower.
It's really important to try to test out theories as well. Like if you're like, let me try my backline hitters in this fight and see how it goes. I mean, you can just try them, literally test it out and see how it goes. If it's not going well, you just retreat. I think I've learned a lot about how PvP combat works in Valkyrie Connect by doing it, and just trying out different theories. So to me, that's a lot of the fun as well, is you can just try things out, because the great thing about Tower is you have full control over the combat. It's not like normal arena where the computer chooses the limit burst and chooses the skill. I mean, it'll proc the skills as soon as they go off, but you never really want to auto in tower if you can avoid it. So you're pretty much in control 100% of the fight. So retreating is very important. I agree.
Yeah, and another thing is that you can use your limit burst to animation cancel their abilities. So you see Thor using Ultra Bolt. I've gotten to the point where if I fight an Erd, and it's generally before I start hitting around 200% or so, I can actually cancel her skill out if I limit burst. Yeah,
that's pretty impressive. Yeah.
Yeah, I found out her skill is not instant. It's less than half a second, but the moment you see the title come up to where she's using her ability, if you hit the limit burst when that happens, her heals won't proc.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I tested it in Tower so that I can do it in Guild Wars, and that was one of the main things.
That's a good point.
Yeah. And one other thing is, in terms of the tokens that you get in Onslaught Towers, what are the top weapons that you generally go for first? Let's just say I'm fresh. What are the top items that you would suggest me to get from the trader? And also, what are the top items that I should hope for from the chest?
Sure. So so anytime you get a chest, you're gonna get a random amount. I mean, one of my friends actually got up to 10,000 from one chest one time. So I mean, you can really start to build up those tokens pretty quick. I would say the top two items for me are the Acer's Tears and the Glimmering Armor. So Acer's Tears will resurrect your unit, which I find I've seen some debate around whether or not it's better to like resurrect yourself into a fight with I think it goes up to 25% of your hit points, I think at level 5, or just wear more hit points to begin with because you're going to come back. But what I found with my teams are if you come back and you have a healer that's about to proc or a regeneration item that can proc, it actually can wind up saving you more over time. So I tend to give my Acer's Tears to like my high DPS mages. My Freya and my Odin both have 5-star Acer's Tears, so I'm a big fan of that item personally. Glimmering Armor is the second one. I think that's probably the one that most people go for first. It's an extremely high hit point armor that also saves you from light damage to I think your 3 lowest hit point units, puts a barrier on them. So I mean, just think about all the units that use light damage. Freya, Odin, Thor. There's so many units that use light damage that it just becomes an item that you want to use pretty much on your main tank. It's also a great off-tank weapon for when you're using multiple tanks, like through Guild Wars or through the larger arena battles, like the 15-man battles. So Glimmering Armor is pretty much a standard. There aren't many other items that I've started going for yet. I actually use I forget what it's called, but it's a staff that causes fear. Yeah. So it's only a 2-star item, but I use it like on my Erd, and I would use it on any one of my healers because it allows you to do some crowd control while you're. I mean, that's not their main purpose. Their main purpose is to heal, so it allows some crowd control to get in there. So I like that item a lot. Luckily, going through towers, I think this has been my 4th one. I wasn't there for the very original came into the game when they had the 2nd tower. I was able to, through 2-star knives and things like that, get mine to 5-star. But if you want to buy a pretty cheap item for the tokens, I would say that Staff of Anguish is a pretty good purchase. I don't use like Dance Leaf, the sword that allows you to heal a little bit when you hit, because I just don't think that its stats are good enough compared to the small amount of heal that you're getting back. And I have not maxed out like a Bow of Evil, but I think that might be my next purchase now that I have enough Acer's Tears and Glimmering Armor. So Bow of Evil seems to be a decent range item. I just maxed out my Momiji and just maxed out my Vivendi, so I haven't really been focusing on ranged attack units. I've been focusing on ranged magic units So now that I actually have a couple decent range attack units, I'm actually gonna spend some tokens on Bow of Evil and go from there. But if nothing, honestly, if you have maxed out those or none of them interest you, I would just save your tokens, because I don't play the Japanese client, but I'm sure that they introduce new items every once in a while. So I would just save whatever extra tokens you have.
All right, yeah. On top of that, the Bow of Evil and Staff of Anguish, I took it all to 5-star, and the Bow of Evil itself is very good attack for your physical attack range. And on top of that, you said you have Verdandi set up.
Yeah.
So her with the attack buff with Momiji is gonna hurt a lot, especially with the Bow of Evil putting curse. It'll help retain what you've done to the unit if they try to heal.
Good.
And as for the chests, the Valhalla items, how would you rank them, or would you say they're all about the same sense? You know, they target various units and they have their own uses, or do you think there's one best one?
I mean, they're all extremely powerful. I'll start there. I mean, they're all, and they actually, I don't know if this is intentional or not, but they actually help a tremendous amount in Onslaught as well, because you're petrifying the opposition, which will allow you to drag out fights longer when you want to drag them out, which will allow you to heal and build energy to go into the next fight. As buff as possible. So ironically, they actually help you the most in tower, I feel. Really, any of them are good. I know that the gun is a recent introduction, so I don't have that at 5-star yet. I have my melee DPS has a 5-star sword. My Freya has a 5-star staff, which is really good for taking out opposing healers. Oftentimes, if you're facing off against a team that only has a healer and a bunch of ranged DPS, oftentimes that healer is going to be targeted. From a sword perspective, it usually hits the tank or a high DPS melee unit. So any of these items that I would have at 5-star, I would be using on my units as long as I was using each one of those types. I have a 4-star bow I use on my Momiji. But really for me, in everyday use, I use a 5-star staff and I use a 5-star sword exclusively right now. But that's because those are just the types of units that I'm focusing on, and I'm almost finished a second 5-star staff as well. And what's interesting is I've actually gotten most of these to drop out of Crimson chests. I don't really know why, but it seems like they drop out of Crimson chests for me more often than they drop out of Ruby chests.
I wish I had that luck.
I know. It's really odd, but I mean, it happens a lot. The other thing to mention, though, is Ruby chests drop more mana, more orbs, and actually the orb drops that I've been getting have been really solid. They always seem to be orbs that I need. Not that we don't always need every type of orb, but they seem to be some of the more annoying ones. Yeah. The ones that you need like hundreds of if you really want to get all your guys. So I've actually been pretty impressed with the amount of the orb drops that have happened, and then the token drops out of the chests obviously get better with Ruby than they do with Crimson. The only thing I guess I'll mention is in the current collaboration tower, the tokens are not used for the same Onslaught tokens that you get out of the normal tower. So they're specifically used for the collaboration. You can get the bulldozer or the fish. So I've been actually building a second bulldozer at 5-star, and both of those also can currently drop out of the chest. So you have a chance of getting the Valhalla weapons or the bulldozer or the fish. So, and I think they both have uses. The bulldozer gives you, it's just attack buff is gigantic and it's a giant attack to one unit. So if I had to choose one or the other, I'd focus on the bulldozer first.
Especially if you have a team focusing from back line to front, especially if you got Verdandi, Momiji, you can start hitting from the back and then going front as well. With the Tuna, obviously players have a water unit, they can capitalize on that like Scotty.
Yeah.
The other thing I forgot to mention when you mentioned Isaac Tier, with the debate between an HP item and Isaac, is if the unit has a higher pool of HP, the extra HP that you get from, let's just say, a Bangle is more insignificant than if you use an Either tier healing at 25% or resurrecting. I mean, so if you have, I'm just gonna throw a number out there just for the sake of simplicity. If a unit has 100k HP, right, and a Bangle gives him 5k, well, the 5k extra is nothing compared to Either tier resurrecting at 25k.
Oh, true, yeah. Yep.
So the larger the HP pool, the more Either tier will stand out, but obviously the lower the HP pool, generally your mages, the Bangles would probably be better.
That's true.
And before we wrap it up, do you have any other tips or anything that we forgot to go over that you may want to mention?
There's the one other really important thing is the use of mercenaries. So you can add, I think it's up to 100 friends on your friends list. Typically, what people do is they go to the high leaderboards and choose the at least 25 people that are there, and then go on from there. Mercenaries, you can use up to 3 per tower floor, but they also reset when your heroes reset. So when it gets very difficult and you have to reset more often, you can actually use a mercenary almost every single fight, or multiple times per fight. You typically want the mercenaries to fill in what you are not able to do. So for example, Hakeo mentioned, he uses mercenary urds very often, which, for a while when I didn't have an urd, that's what I was doing as well. I've used mercenary tanks if my tank is weak, because she doesn't have a lot of hit points left over, and I want to bring her in later in the fight when I know it's a multi-round fight. So she can heal herself up later, but in the beginning, I can just waste one of my mercenary tanks up front. The other unit I use a lot, and you really want to hunt for somebody that has one, is Mia at 5-star. There aren't that many of them in the game that I see, but if you have access to one as a mercenary, it'll supremely help you win against heavy tank units, especially later on, because most tanks and occasionally other DPS will have self-healing items and regeneration items, and they obviously help you when you're getting those massive stat buffs, and that's where Mia comes into play. She'll turn that healing into damage. So I've been using her a lot in fights that I simply cannot win. But I can't overstate how important it is to choose the right mercenaries, to make sure you use them all the time. Normally, the last fight of each tower floor is, for some reason, significantly harder than all the other ones. To such an extent, it's almost unreal as to how much harder that 10th floor can be. So that's definitely where you want to use your mercenary. Like I said, I've used more fight if I know it's going to take more than one round, simply to get myself to the next level. And then they always refresh when your overall units refresh, so they can really help you enter a fight with your regular units as healed and as buffed as possible. Just keep in mind that your mercenaries do not start out with full energy or anything like that. They can limit burst if you have the limit burst set, but they will not start out with full energy. That's just one thing to mention.
Alright, that's actually really helpful, and hopefully I find that your knowledge for towers more than others that I know, and
thanks.
the information that you give to everyone will obviously be very, very helpful, as well as to me too. And if you want to see more collaboration videos, guys, just let me know. I may have AUStarwars back with another guide video as well, since Tower is not the only thing that he does. And if you like the video, please like the video. If you want to see this type of content, please subscribe. And if you want to see what I've been up to in the game, as well as AUStarwars, follow myself and him on Twitter. I'll provide his Twitter link below. And until next time, take care.